In 2012, I created a performance piece for Cabaret Organique in Paris, presented during a residency that ran from May 15th to June 6th, with 3 live evening events on May 19th, May 26th, and June 2nd, in addition to the opening on May 14th. The cabaret was organized by the art collective Nyctalope. A nyctalope is a creature capable of seeing in the dark, a fitting metaphor. Their manifesto proposed that, as artists working in dark times, we must navigate using all of our visionary senses. The premise resonated deeply with my own practice: illumination through flesh, through image, through embodied ritual. The 2-story exhibit space was divided into 6 thematic zones: sex, death, flesh, virtual, time, and mind. I was situated in the section devoted to flesh. My byline read, "Sunny Buick, tattooed." In her retro carnival tattoo parlor, Sunny Buick Tattoos performs and punctures rainbow flesh. From the outset, the invitation itself was unexpected. I had been contacted by the somewhat mysterious Nyctalope collective and asked whether I would be interested in creating a live painting performance. I laughed and immediately declined. Painting, for me, is intensely private. The idea of being observed while working, particularly given my meticulous, slow, detail-driven technique, felt almost unbearable. A painting might barely evolve over the course of a single evening. The process would appear static, opaque. Tattooing, however, was another matter. I have no hesitation being watched while I tattoo. The act is already durational, yet finite. A piece can be completed within a few hours. The canvas is alive. There is dialogue, endurance, visible transformation. It is inherently more compelling as live spectacle. What might feel invasive in the studio becomes charged and purposeful in performance. The exhibition itself was an ambitious group show centered on interpretations of the female body, spanning visual arts, literature, and installation. Approximately 40 artists participated, including figures such as Joel Peter Witkin and Ray Seizure. The live evenings expanded the dialogue into dance, music, and performance, featuring artists from diverse disciplines and backgrounds. On May 19th, Julie Atlas Muse performed, straddling performance art, dance, and burlesque. And known for her work with the troupe Cabaret New Burlesque, she occupies a singular space between New York's underground nightlife and the contemporary art world. Her practice destabilizes genre and belief alike. On May 26, Big Sexy Noise performed, featuring Lydia Lunch, long regarded as a muse of the New York underground. Accompanied by her noise orchestra, she delivered an unembellished, confrontational sound, raw, destructive rock that dissolved boundaries between mind and body, intellect and abandon. The final evening, June 2nd, presents Uncles and Angels, a collaboration between South African choreographer Neliswe Zaba and video artist Mak J. Van Vuren. The work interrogated chastity, virginity testing, purity, and power, offering a critical and disillusioned perspective on tradition and control. It marked the piece's European premiere within the framework of Cabaret Organique. Within this constellation, each artist grappled in their own way with the politics, mythology, and materiality of the body. My contribution occupied the zone of flesh. My retro carnival tattoo parlor functioned simultaneously as studio, stage, and sideshow. Rather than representing flesh, I marked it. In the darkness, evoked by Nyctalope's manifesto, my task was simple: to illuminate through skin. I consider tattooing itself to be inherently performative. This understanding was shaped in large part by the encounters with practitioners of Japanese traditional tattooing at international conventions. Their presence operated differently within the same environment, less as commercial service providers and more as custodians of a visible embodied ritual. Their setups, working on raised tables while seated low to the ground, surrounded by cushions, textiles, and a distinct spatial logic, stood in stark contrast to the sterility of other booths. They generated both spectacle and fascination, drawing the audience into a space that felt at once intimate and theatrical. My perception of tattoo conventions is that they are fundamentally carnivalesque arenas, sites of hypervisibility, spectacle, adornment, and endurance. The tattooed subject becomes both participant and exhibit. I would often arrive at conventions with an aspiration towards glamour, a heightened, almost operatic self-presentation. But the lived reality rarely matched the intensity of that internal vision. This gap between the imagined and the actual became generative. It ultimately gave rise to the idea for this performance. In dialogue with the collective, we began to imagine a scenography inspired by these Japanese tattoo environments, considering how tattooing could be staged, framed, and understood as a living performance. Within a different framework, the act itself shifts register. The tattoo bed becomes a stage, the body both canvas and protagonist. It is no longer merely a service transaction, but a ceremony. I also expressed a long-harbored dream of tattooing in a small retro trailer, an itinerant, self-contained environment that could be meticulously adorned and activated as a mobile studio. Such a structure would function simultaneously as sculpture, stage set, and sanctuary, decorated with deliberate excess, velvet drapes, gilded mirrors, nostalgic Americana. It would literalize the fantasy architecture surrounding tattoo culture while offering a controlled frame in which to subvert it. For me, tattooing occupies a liminal space between performance and ritual. It is durational, relational, and irreversible. There is consent, preparation, endurance, and aftercare. The needle punctures the skin in a rhythm that borders on incantatory. The exchange between artist and recipient carries a charge, trust, vulnerability, transformation, that feels closer to right than commodity and transaction. Yet it is undeniably a spectacle as well, watched, photographed, circulated. Ultimately, my project sought to hold these dualities in suspension, glamour and labor, fetish and authorship, spectacle and sacrament. By foregrounding tattooing as a part performance, part ritual, I hope to invite viewers to reconsider the act not as subcultural ornamentation alone, but as a charged site of image-making, embodiment, and transformation. A few months after the initial contact, I was invited to visit the Nyctalop's headquarters to further develop the scenography and to see what DM RK had constructed for the project. To my astonishment, there in the middle of the living room stood a small, dazzling jewel, a fully dismantleable gypsy wagon. One entire wall opened outward, transforming the structure into something akin to a monumental television frame, a device for viewing, for staging, for conscious display. It was immediately clear that this was not merely a prop, but an architecture of spectacle. Shortly thereafter, someone arrived at my studio carrying an American-style mailbox. It was their suggestion that I paint it to echo the wagon's ornamentation, extending the fictional domesticity of the scene. We installed it alongside a white picket fence, amplifying the tableau's quaint, almost storybook sensibility, a deliberate contrast to the charged act that would unfold within it. I already had my lucky tattoo stool in progress, and I decided it would serve as an essential accessory. It carried with it the residue of past conventions and rituals of labor. Its presence grounded the installation in live practice. 2 hand-painted banners were affixed to the exterior of the trailer, while my convention banner hung within the exhibition room itself, bridging my itinerant professional identity with the gallery context. Inside the wagon, I placed candles and framed images, small devotional gestures that lent the interior the atmosphere of a shrine as much as a studio. The installation was situated in the basement of the gallery in what we call in France the cave. The vaulted ceilings and exposed stone walls imbued the space with a distinctly French sensibility, intimate, historic, faintly subterranean. The gallery itself is located within a passage, one of the covered arcades that punctuate Paris. There are more than a dozen of these passages scattered throughout the city, and I have always been enamored of them. To participate in an exhibition within such a site felt deeply meaningful. These passages are, in many ways, the proto-shopping mall. Over a century old, modest in scale, lined with eccentric boutiques and artist ateliers. They were built for rainy days when long skirts dragged through muddy streets and the covered walkway offered refuge. They remain spaces of wandering, of looking, of curated commerce, architectures designed for both consumption and contemplation. For the installation, AstroTurf was laid across the floor of my room, and a large photographic backdrop depicting a field of cherry trees in blossom was mounted behind the wagon. The effect was transformative. Suddenly, the trailer appeared parked in an idyllic clearing, suspended between pastoral fantasy and theatrical artifice. My task was simple in structure, though complex in implication, to tattoo within this constructed environment for 4 evenings, the opening night and the following 3 Saturdays. The space proved so compelling that I continued to bring clients there during the subsequent weeks, temporarily converting the installation into a functioning tattoo studio. To find participants for the performative aspect of the project, I held an open casting call via my Facebook page. Within 24 hours, I received more than 30 responses. From these, I selected a dozen women whose proposals resonated conceptually and aesthetically with the work. Each evening, I tattooed 3 of them. They were parameters. They were asked to dress in a manner that was overtly glamorous and sexy, yet without vulgarity. An important distinction, as the project sought to interrogate spectacle without collapsing into caricature. The tattoos themselves had to be placed on accessible areas of the body, ensuring visibility within the tableau and reinforcing the act's performative dimension. Over those nights, the wagon functioned simultaneously as home, stage, studio, and reliquary. The women who entered it were not passive subjects, but collaborators in a living image, framed, illuminated, and inscribed within an architecture that blurred the boundaries between domestic fantasy, ritual practice, and public display. A manifesto for the glamorous deviant. It begins with a fascination for the forbidden, exposed skin, projected exoticism, deviance personified in lipstick, leather, and lace, high heels, thick mascara. She enters already etched by the gaze. The voyeur may see my client as some kind of strange female fakir, and the tattoo as a spiritual act. Watching a body performing endurance for pleasure, for applause, for some presumed pathology. This reading reveals more about the architecture of desire than the woman herself. The tattooed body is an altar. In the staged act of tattooing, her discomfort becomes visible. The needle articulates pain. Admittedly, the client submits voluntarily to transformation. In this ritualized exchange, pain is neither punishment nor spectacle, it is passage. A beatific act of beauty. Through controlled pain, the body sweats mercy. Suffering voluntarily can momentarily help to access compassion for those who suffer without choice. The flinch cuts to the endorphin bloom. Bliss enters through the wound. She is feeling blessed. Grace is etched within the flesh. Why does she do it? The question hovers, edged with accusation. The reason to be tattooed are as numerous as the choice of motif. Memorial, adornment, reclamation, boredom, love, defiance, aesthetics, bravado. The multiplicity of whys resist tidy explanation, yet the incredulous refrain persists. It looks painful. Yes, it is. And so is beauty. Considered the sanctioned tortures we normalized in the name of desirability. Pierced ears, permanence, high heels that contort the spine, clip-on earrings that torture the lobe, corsets clinching the waist into submission, hair pulled too tight, epilation, waxing hair ripped from the root, chemical dyes seeping into the scalp, dieting as slow erasure. The tattoo machine hums like an instrument of incantation, invoking images of hooded hairdryers in vintage salons, a line of women seated beneath domes of heat, enduring in silence for the promise of beauty. One torture device punctures, the other bakes. Both promise transformation, both stylized endurance. What then distinguishes ritual from torture? Consent, intention. In this tableau, the client is not a zoo specimen, but a collaborator. The fakir image collapses under scrutiny. She is neither martyr nor captive. Yet the audience must confront its own complicity. Is she a man-trap, baited, fetishized seduction? Or are we seeing a mirror reflecting the viewer's appetite for caged spectacle? The voyeur is participating. The stage tattoo session destabilizes dualities, sacred, profane, empowerment, objectification, glamour degradation. Lipstick and tattoos become vestments. Bloody images, reliquaries. The studio floor a chapel. The machine both relic and wand. The tattoo is both performance and ritual. Part spectacle, part sacrament. The forbidden is no longer a border but a gateway to be transversed with intention. In crossing, the body claims narrative authority. It refuses passivity. It chooses inscription over erasure. She does it because she can. Beauty has always demanded tribute. Because to mark the body is to declare sovereignty over it. This is consecration. Voyeurism is a profoundly human curiosity, particularly when it comes to witnessing someone being tattooed. Even those indifferent to tattoos find themselves magnetized by the act. In the context of a street shop, this ogling can feel intrusive, disruptive to both artist and client. But what happens when we deliberately frame the act for the voyeur within us all, when we acknowledge the gaze and design for it? Of course, such a gesture requires collaborators, clients willing to be seen, to participate in this heightened visibility. The invitation becomes a kind of sanctioned peek through the keyhole, two women engaged in a mysterious beauty ritual, partially concealed yet fully on display. This charged threshold between privacy and spectacle exerts a magnetic pull. It activates fantasy. While my tattoos are never conceived to service fantasy, I am not naive about the gravitational force of sex appeal. The allure exists. A woman may deploy her body as charm, as provocation, as strategy. Yet it is also simply her body, the site she inhabits, authors, modifies. She may decorate it, not to enchant or please, but because adornment is a sovereign act. My strange beauty parlor exists as a service, an offering to women who wish to embellish themselves with permanent war paint. Its atmosphere borrows from the old circus sideshow. Carnival lights strung overhead, a hum in the air. The buzz of the tattoo machine becomes a siren call. Long, curvaceous legs extend beneath the glow, hypnotic not because they are passive, but because they command attention. Glamour operates here as a spell, seductive, dazzling, faintly dangerous. An eyeful of freakish beauty reclaimed from the language of spectacle. My mentor, Henry Goldfield, often reminded me, we're in show business. Perhaps that refrain planted the seed for this performance. I rarely engage in performance art explicitly, and so I approach discourse work with acute self-awareness. What am I doing? Why? What does it signify? In truth, the piece is simply an extension of my daily practice, yet displaced, reframed, aestheticized. Removed from its commercial context, tattooing becomes a mirror of my own vision of beauty and authorship. Preparing for the stage, I consider my self-presentation with unusual deliberation. The gesture differs little from daily life. Only the degree shifts. A special occasion demands amplification. I select the role, assemble the character, curate the surface. From external fragments, fabric, heel height, lipstick shade, I construct an illusion that nonetheless reveals something authentic. How can one be a feminist in high heels? By refusing the binary. As an artist, I can make myself the medium. Identity, particularly within an American cultural framework, is something one composes, an inheritance perhaps of Ellis Island and the possibility of reinvention. Names were shortened, narratives rewritten, lives reauthored. The new world promised self-creation. Life then becomes a continual metamorphosis. We shed and layer selves, like a chameleon, adjusting hue to environment or mood. We recalibrate our exterior in dialogue with our interior. When I stand before the mirror, I approach my reflection as I would a canvas, adding, subtracting, refining until harmony emerges. The image evolves as I evolve. Context alters composition. I am deeply invested in questions of self-dissatisfaction, change, and transformation. What constitutes a valuable self-image? If we are born into a body that diverges from our ideal, do we revise the ideal or do we modify what lies within our agency? We customize the chassis. Tattoos and makeup become tools of self-authorship, choices about how I see myself and how I wish to see myself. As I was contemplating this performance, a client fortuitously brought a book on nomadism by the feminist philosopher Rosie Braidotti. Her conception of the nomadic subject describes identity as process, perpetual becoming, drawing from the past to situate oneself in the present. She addresses the historical framing of women as monstrous, fascinating yet aberrant, desirable yet deviant, both captivating and condemned. This discourse echoes the cultural suspicion directed towards tattooing. The female body has long been cast as different, measured against a male norm coded as rational and logical, while femininity is labeled intuitive, irrational, other. But the difference becomes a deficit. How curious then that tattoos too are often coded as negative, excessive, deviant, marginal. I choose to be tattooed in part to mark difference, perhaps because I already inhabit difference as a woman. I accentuate it with makeup, with long hair, with skirts, sometimes with high heels, provided I don't have to walk too far. There persists a notion that tattooing is inherently masculine. I don't agree. The tattooed woman is intensifying her own singularity. 90% of tattoo magazines feature women on their covers. The exotic-sized image sells. But is the contemporary ideal client increasingly female? Perhaps. Perhaps the market senses what culture resists, that women are claiming authorship of their own surfaces. This performance was not didactic in a conventional sense, yet it sought to demonstrate, to provoke curiosity within myself and within the audience. to stage fascination rather than deny it, to expose spectacle while inhabiting it consciously. If this is showbiz, the show must go on, but on our terms. Be different, stand out, inscribe a new identity.